Good evening, Bermuda, and welcome to the second episode of Education Connection. I'm Dana Selassie, filling in this evening for Ms. Alicia Trott of the Department of Communications. First, I'd like to introduce the Minister of Education, the Honorable Diallo Rabane, along with our two guests this evening, Dr. Lana Tolbert, School Psychologist, and Mr. Tyrone McHardy, Head of Student Services at the Barclay Institute. One key issue that has become apparent as parents have been working at home with our students during this period of remote learning is emotional well-being. In tonight's episode, the minister and our guests will discuss strategies for managing emotional and mental health for both parents and students. This is an interactive discussion, so we welcome and encourage you to send in your questions and your comments, and we'll do our best to get to each of them. All of the questions and comments will be recorded, and if we do not get to yours, we will respond via our various media platforms at a later date. And now I'd like to turn it over to Minister Rabane. Good evening, Minister.
Good evening. Good evening, Dana. Good evening, our listening guests. I want to thank you for taking some time off this evening to just spend a little bit of time with us. As Dr. Selassie said, this is our second episode of Education Connect. It is a bi-weekly program that we've decided to put together to give you, the public, an opportunity to ask us those critical questions that you want to ask about education, but also allow us to come to you with some things that are happening within education. Today we're going to be, as Dr. Selassie said, we're going to be talking about the topic of managing the emotional well-being and mental health for not just our students but our parents as well. As we have navigated through this COVID pandemic that we find ourselves in and resulting in shelter in place and now remote learning, it does come with some things that certainly are different from what we expect or what we've come to expect from schooling. Being at home, being at home with your children, playing that teacher role with your children, and those sorts of things can take a real toll on parents, especially parents who are unprepared for that, and parents who also have to work at the same time. So you're working, you're playing teacher, and you're doing those sorts of things. So I'm happy to say that we have two esteemed guests, Tyrone McHardy from Barclay Institute and Dr. Lana Talbot, child psychologist from the Department of Education, to really reach out to us, give us some tips, and then be available to answer any questions that you may have. So with that, Dana, I'll pass it back to you so our guests can introduce themselves.
Thank you, Minister. So we'll start with Dr. Lana Talbot. Can you give us a brief introduction of who you are and the work that you do? And then we'll go straight over to Mr. McCarty right after that.
Good evening, everyone. I'm a school psychologist. Been working as a school psychologist within the public system for more than 20 years. I service from preschool up to senior school. At present, I service the senior schools, the two senior schools, Barclay and Cedar Bridge. And so it's quite a lot, but I'm in and out of schools or consulting with teachers, consulting with counselors, with principals, and providing them with insight for students. At times, I have to conduct assessments on students to determine where the challenges are or where the needs are, and to provide therapeutic intervention with students. It's been quite a journey, but I enjoy doing what I do. Okay.
Mr. McCarty?
Yes, good evening. Good evening. So I am Tyrone McHardy. I am the head of student services at the Barclay Institute. I've been at the Barclay Institute now for about 15 years. But 14 of those years, it was spent being an educational therapist and then as a year-level counselor. And so that's where I've been able to sharpen my tools, so to speak. And prior to that, I've worked in other human services environments. And so I'm someone who likes to deal with likes to serve and likes to help others. In my current capacity as head of student services, I am supervising the comprehensive school counseling program, which I will speak to about later in this broadcast, and also the personnel who also contribute in delivering that program. So that's who I am, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you for that introduction from both of you. I'll start off with throwing out the question, what is emotional well-being and mental well-being, and how do you, Dr. Talbot and Mr. McCarty, how does that fit within what you do?
Well, it fits in that we work with students and with young people, and often what we see is young people who exhibit behaviors that impact them socially and emotionally, having to cope, having to deal with issues, family issues, personal issues, developmental issues that impact on them. And so providing young people with strategies and interventions to help them cope better and to go and to mature as they mature in the process. And so I see it frequently with young people coming in from preschool to senior school, and in each developmental level, each presents a different challenge. And I'll talk more about that in my presentation.
Yes, and if I can piggyback on that, one's emotional well-being is obviously very, very important. It's one of the parts of the human being. And so it features heavily in the work that the counselors and educational therapists and anyone who interfaces with students, it features very heavily. We know when we're talking about emotions, we're talking about feelings, and feelings are a product of one's thinking. And in the work that we do, if we're able to change someone's thinking or enhance someone's thinking or present a different perspective on how one thinks about something, then naturally their feelings, their emotional well-being changes as a result. And so one's emotions cannot be separated from the whole person. And so that's just one feature of what we do as counselors and therapists.
And it impacts children greatly because when their social emotional development, if they're struggling with that, what we find is that in most cases in academic settings, they're not actually able to perform at their best. And you'll find that sometimes children will underperform based on whatever they're facing socially and emotionally. It is so important that we help them with that, because if we don't, they cannot learn, and it impacts them, and they don't. Teachers wonder what is wrong for child, but sometimes they're struggling with social issues that they bring to school, or the current climate in which they're facing, like now with the pandemic, impacts children greatly. And so it is the whole person, but that is one important aspect of the individual child.
Absolutely, Dr. Tolbert. And so when you may hear sometimes phraseology that's put out there for someone to just get over it or to suck it up or to just move on, you know that's not actually attainable really when dealing with the whole person. So very good point.
And sometimes what we see in the school is that some children who require even additional supports because of what they're going through, they can't even function in a regular classroom setting because they're impacted by these various issues that they're facing or cannot comprehend or understand. And sometimes developmentally, it impacts children at the various stages differently. And you'll find that some are able to cope and some are not. And so unless they get their full intervention, which may mean sometimes us having to even provide short-term therapeutic intervention with students, and sometimes if they need it on a long-term basis, they'll be referred to an agency outside of education.
Okay, thank you for that. Minister, we'd like to bring you in the discussion at this point. What have been some of the challenges that you in your position have seen or heard as far as support needed for parents?
And thank you for asking that. It's a very topical question. Well, what I do find is in the era that we find ourselves in, I call it the social media era. Unfortunately, whereas there is support, and this is one of the purposes of having this type of discussion. for their support within our school system and within the actual schools themselves. Unfortunately, parents and our students will go silent, or they won't request that help, or they'll reach out to social media, and then they're bombarded with all these theories and different and different personal experiences, which can help in some cases, but in most cases it doesn't lead to successful resolution of some of the issues that they're facing. One of the other things that I do see in my position, unfortunately, and thankfully it's not as prevalent as some people think, is denial. Especially when we actually reach out to parents and say, listen, there's something here that we want to we feel needs to have some different examination or some different processes put in place to assist. And we will sometimes get pushback from the parents who say, no, I don't think you know what you're talking about, or I don't think that my child needs whatever. And then it becomes a battle, because at the end of the day, the only person who really doesn't benefit from any of that is the child itself. And so as long as we're able to, and as long as people understand and fully comprehend that everything we do, everything we say, every decision that we make starts with what is best for the student to move forward and to gain everything that they need to gain from being within the education system. And I think if everyone looks at it from that perspective, they'll see that there's nothing being done untoward, there's nothing being done that we wouldn't do with our own children. We just want the best for our students. And that's probably the two of the biggest challenges that I see. Persons not reaching out for assistance and going to other places where they may be not getting that good advice, or in denial when there is something there that needs to be addressed.
Dr. Talbot, thank you for that, Minister. Dr. Talbot, can you just touch on that, the issue of denial? I think in our community, denial is a very key part as far as a cultural recognition of needing support. What can you say to that?
In our culture, reaching out for help sometimes is seen by some as a sign of weakness. And because Bermuda is such a small community, some persons feel uncomfortable knowing that they are actually getting assistance in some area, particularly when there's mental health issues and you have to reach out and get that support. Some persons are not comfortable with that because they see it as a stigma attached to their family unit. And so therefore, it does happen. And then sometimes there's denial in terms of accepting that their young person may be undergoing some struggles that need some assistance with. And sometimes based on the changing dynamics of our family structures, our children are seeing much more today. And so therefore, when they come to school, teachers, counselors are the key persons that observe and see these things going on. So during the pandemic, some children are actually at risk because, and they're on online learning, because teachers and counselors and key support systems within the school that usually can keep an eye on students, and they also sometimes already have a knowledge of students who are having some challenges, can work with them and report it and provide support to the families. But while we're in this COVID and out of school learning, it becomes more difficult. So some of those children who see school as a support base and also like a safe haven at times is not getting that at this time. So therefore, sometimes concerns become more noticeable when they return back to school. We're almost starting back at 0 point when we had made steps forward with the young person. And so denial for our society sometimes is there because of the stigma that parents feel and saying, my child needs help. My child's a little bit different from another child. Maybe they're having some struggles. But as children develop and through the developmental stages, struggles and having difficulties is common. And we just need to accept it and move on and accept the help to get our young people back on track.
Thank you, Dr. Tolbert. I want to bring you in, Mr. Mccarty, from a counselor's perspective. What can you say as far as the support that you offer in your capacity for those people that have been identified as possibly needing help but are sort of resistant to getting the support? And then how do you support those that are actually at home working remotely? And the transitioning back into school, because we're at the point now, Minister, where we're transitioning back into school. That's the aim. So how do we work through supporting students through all of those emotional upheavals, if you will?
Yes, very good questions. That's jam-packed. As Dr. Tolbert intimated, denial is common within our society because it's been how we've been socialized, unfortunately. And so, when someone needs to avail himself or herself for help or counseling, they can be resistant in doing so. So denial is common and it is also normal, particularly along the process of change. So what we would do in our capacity as counselors in the school is do a form of motivational interviewing and talk to the students about what are the advantages and disadvantages of talking to someone. What could result, what could be the advantages if you talk to someone, or the disadvantages. So we would have to build rapport and trust with that person, and we can move them along uh, this spectrum of where they're in denial to acceptance, to seeking out help, and it takes work. Along with the denial, they could be in denial because of fear and anxiety. You mentioned that as the school system is gearing up to resume school in the building, there could be students who are naturally becoming trepidatious about again going in the building because we're in this pandemic and we know the different losses that have occurred as a result of this pandemic. So it will be incumbent upon us as the counselors and therapists in the school system to be able to share with the students now that it will occur and how do we deal with it? What coping strategies can be employed now to guard us when we have to re-enter the school building?
Okay, that is a lot. Minister, do you want to make any comments on that or add to that part of the discussion?
It is a lot for us to handle, and we're doing all that we can to ensure that we have the things in place to support our students and support and not just our students, it's our staff as well that do need that support. In terms of our returning back to buildings, I know towards the end of the program I will summarize and give some urgings on some of the things that we can do. But I think at this juncture, I know both of our esteemed guests have prepared some presentations, and I think we should jump into that and then get back to the general conversation.
Most definitely. Thank you. So, Dr. Talbot, we're going to allow you to go first with your presentation. Okay. And I know I will be off, and everyone else will be hanging around. So, over to you, Dr. Talbot. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. My presentation, I'm going to talk about managing students' emotional well-being and mental health during remote learning. As we all know, COVID pandemic has had disrupted education for at least 95% of students around the world. So Bermuda is not unique to the impact that it has had on us. The pandemic and the lockdown has caused economic distress, and there's also indications sometimes towards abuse towards children because, as I mentioned earlier, school sometimes is a safe haven for some children because counselors, teachers, and school principals sometimes have a special, unique relationship with students, and they are aware of students who are struggling with some issues. Home confinement for some children and adolescents is sometimes associated with uncertainty and anxiety because of the disruption in their education, the disruption of not being able to partake in their physical activities, opportunities for socialization with their peers, which is so important to young people. Also, school provides what's very critical for young people with mental challenges, having routine and structure. Young people thrive off of structure, although most people think they don't. They look forward to structure, and sometimes being out of school, it presents a challenge to their well-being. Remote learning has impacts on children in socially, emotionally, and in terms of the overall mental health. As I mentioned earlier, in the absence of having structured settings for school, for long durations, result in disruption in routine. Some children become bored. Some have a lack of innovative ideas for engaging in various academic and extracurricular activities, and this impacts their overall social emotional well-being and development. Some children have also, as research has indicated, that during this time, some children have expressed lower levels of affect for not being able to play outdoors, not being able to meet friends, and engage in school activities. And another major cause of why we need to get back into school is that remote learning sometimes contributes towards further gaps in children's academic performance. A population that is impacted greatly by remote learning are children with special needs. Children with attention deficit disorder, learning disabilities, developmental delays, and emotional difficulties, they tend to be impacted greatly during remote learning. Why? Because these children sometimes require more one-on-one physical contact with teachers and therapists in order to learn. They have to be constantly redirected in the learning process. Some require one-on-one instructions in order to learn content well. Some need to have hands-on activities, hands-on manipulatives in order to learn a concept. And they need structure in their environment for learning. And remote learning sometimes for this population is not very effective. As I said, that children are impacted differently based on the developmental stages they're at through remote learning and through the socio-emotional impact it has on them. What we find with the preschoolers is that one of the major issues is the clinginess to parents. Remember now, some preschoolers are entering a formal setting for the first times in their lives. And in that setting, they're learning to learn routine within the school day. And also what for some youngsters at preschool level, it's the first time they're being separated from the parents for a full day, for a full length of time that they never had before. And so clinginess to parents is a problem. And sometimes they have sleep disturbances. Sometimes there's a regression in their behavior where they may start sucking their thumb or doing certain behaviors of that nature. Some experience bedwetting as a reaction to their emotional behavior. Some also start to fear the dark. And so returning to school for some of the preschoolers would be like starting all over again, because now they're back into a structured environment and they have to now learn how to separate from mommy and daddy again, or from the caretaker. At the primary level, what we start to see the impact of what's going on with the pandemic and with our young people emotionally is that sometimes what you'll find is poor concentration on learning a task remotely, or even when they go back into the classroom environment. Sometimes there's withdrawal from activities and friends. They become irritable. Sometimes they have nightmares, and sometimes they avoid remote learning altogether. There's an avoidance. They don't want to partake in it. And sometimes there's an aggressiveness from preschool children in primary school. At the adolescent stage, moving more towards middle school to high school level, there's too much time on some of them's hands. The structure is not as much as possible. Sometimes they don't get the full structure that they get when they enter into the classroom environment. And so what happens is that some of these children start to begin to experiment with high-risk behaviors, such as alcohol use and drug use. Some become agitated and full of anxiety about what's going to happen next. Will they get to go back to school? What would the COVID do with our numbers coming up? And they've seen a high increase of deaths in Bermuda. Some have anxiety starts to set in, increased conflict. Sometimes they complain about physical complaints that may not even be actually happening to them. And some have poor concentration, and sometimes even boredom shows up working on a computer, because it doesn't allow them to have the interaction with their peers and the classroom teacher daily. And some of the anxieties that children are feeling in terms of what's going on now, the climate they're in and the climate that we're all in, we may experience some of these things ourselves as parents, is anger. The perception of danger, stress, or opposition is enough to trigger the fight or flight response, leaving the child feeling angry without a way to communicate effectively. Difficulty sleeping, the child may have difficulty sometimes falling asleep. And falling asleep sometimes is one of the hallmarks of anxiety, that the child is feeling some anxiety about some issue. It may be they're concerned about a family member that's very sick, and because we've loosened so many people, they're worried about, is someone in my family going to die next? And so these are realities of where we are today. Defiance, sometimes the child becomes defiant, and not defiant. Sometimes it's defiant in a way in which they're feeling anxious or helplessness. Not necessarily that the child has a behavioral issue. This is just the way they're acting out those unresolved feelings and not knowing how to respond to a situation. And then another one would be channeling. It's when a child is normally relatively calm, responds in a calm manner, but for no uncertain reason may just certainly fly off the handle and just shout back at you and be very upset very quickly. These are just signs of how anxiety is expressed through this young person. Lack of focus. I often hear teachers calling me, even during remote learning, they're just not focused. I mean, they're on the computer, the technology format, trying to learn, but the child is unable to really remain focused for too long a period of time to grasp the concepts that are being taught or to follow through with the task that's being assigned. And then there's avoidance. Sometimes the young person just avoids taking part in particular activities, and they just don't want to be a part of it. And all of this is just part of them experiencing their social well-being is impacted on them, all what's going on around them. And sometimes they engage in over-planning, and this is just the way of the child trying to take back some type of control. And sometimes it's done through defiant behavior, but it's not behavior that we can say the child is acting rude. It's just that they're trying to cope, and that's one of their coping mechanisms. And negativity is another one in which the child who with anxiety tends to experience negative thoughts to a greater degree in intensity than positive ones. And so what I ask as parents to do is to try to not always focus on the negative, but to focus on positive things and share positive things with young people. And so just to talk about a little bit more about how parents and guardians can help managing children through remote learning and through the time of where they're dealing with lots of unknowns. Often I have experienced calls from parents, from teachers, from parents, and from school principals saying, my child refuses to do remote learning. That's a tough one. And so, and I say to them, it's okay, accept it first, because many children don't do well in remote learning because they cannot focus and they're unmotivated. And then also parents are under great stress. So remote learning is synonymous with stress for parents as well, because some parents have to go to work, and then there's no one home to guide the child through the day. So, of course, sometimes some children, when no one is there to tell them, get on schedule, do your work, that's the time they say, nobody's around, I'm going to go ahead and watch TV, or I'm going to play my Fortnite, or I'm going to just do what I want to do. And so it becomes stressful because then the parents getting calls, oh, my child's not done the assignment. So it's a very stressful time for parents and for students as well. And because it's a tough time. So we just have to try to work around that and having log-on times for checking in on children and maybe calling home to see what they're doing periodically when you're not able to be there. One thing that's important during this time, though, is to let children express their emotions. Let them feel sad when they need to feel sad. So you can normalize that being sad is a normal emotion. It's a normal feeling. And they may feel frustrated at times if they're mourning someone who's lost in the family. Just provide them with support, empathy, and make them feel as best as you can. That's the best way to manage it. And keep in mind that because of school closures, what's impacting children is they're not able to take part in the daily activities with their peers, such as taking part in school plays and concerts, going to school matches with one another and having that rivalry between schools and doing activities. Some of these activities children are deeply disappointed about because they look forward to that. That's all a part of the school environment, all the part of building friendships and relationships with others, and developing good social skills. And so students really look forward to that. And so at home at times they may get sad because they're not being able to engage in those types of activities. And for us as adults, we're older, so we measure it against our own lifetime experiences, so we don't feel as great an impact from those losses as children do. And how can we work with them? How can we help our children develop the social emotional health? Just reassure children that they're safe. Provide the opportunity to talk with your child about things. Listen to them carefully. Answer their questions at a level that the child will understand. Admit if you don't know the answer. Just say, I don't know the answer to that. Be very comfortable doing that because we don't know everything. Also monitor adult conversations and exposure to the media, particularly negative information that's coming in. And help your child understand that there's a wide range of reactions and it's normal to feel happy, sad, and glad and mad at the same time. That those emotions are all a part of our emotional development. Encourage children to express their feelings to adults who can help them understand their emotions. And also, as I mentioned earlier, focus on some of the positives. Focus on good things that people are doing, like our healthcare workers. Praise what they're doing. Do things with the family together that can make the child feel good. So don't let it be all doom and gloom. Always be calm about things as possible and be proactive in your conversation when you're talking about COVID-19 around children. Because younger children, the younger they are, the more fearful they come about what's going on. And it really makes them feel uncomfortable and very sad. One important thing during this time is to make sure you stick to a routine with your young people. Stick to a bedtime, stick to mealtime. Have a schedule during the day that they're working on. Most times the school provides a schedule. It's very important that routine is important during this time for young people. Also, find hobbies that they can still be involved in, physical activities that they can still do. In other words, children always require structure, adolescents more so, and they thrive off of structure. They may tell you no, but they actually really do like it. And so therefore, set the day out for the young person so they know what's happening from one moment to the next. But don't forget to include some free time where the young person can engage and connect with their friends and family. And you can do that via telephone and video chats, any form of technology in which the young person can connect. And also set some time aside where the young person is engaged in family activity and doing family chores around the home and leaving the technology aside, not always on the technology side of it. Another thing to do to help our young people to develop their social, emotional, and mental health during this time is to keep providing them with a healthy, balanced diet, maintaining oral health, physical exercise, making sure that they're getting proper amount of rest at night to avoid fatigue, and enhancing their immunity. Monitor the television viewing, particularly the types of shows they're watching that can, particularly for young children, that can upset them if they see too much going on. They can't always process it, the amount of information that's filtering into them. Take time to talk to your young person. Because children often take their emotional cues from adults. So be careful how you react, because how you react is how the child's going to react. And so we want to be able to manage our own emotions around our young people so that they can react in a more positive framework. And also be honest and accurate. We have, as parents and as teachers, we have to also manage our own anxiety at times and not to overshare our fears with our young people.
Dr. Talbot?
Yes.
This is some fantastic information. We have to just wrap it up very quickly because we want to get Mr. Mccarty in as well.
Okay.
So we can give you 2 more minutes, please.
Okay, so what I'll do then is, did you want me to jump down to what we can do, who they can contact in the school?
Yes, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, so parents and if you're needing some help, the school system, what you can do is contact your first line of contact is the school principal regarding concerns of your child. And then the school counselors who are usually already familiar with children who may need some help socially and emotionally. And then there's the educational therapists who can provide help with children who's having some challenging behaviors. And then if there's areas where the child is having help with having some issues or some challenges with learning, you can contact a learning support teacher or the special education officer who will work with children who have disabilities and provide services that meets their needs. And in some schools, there are school social workers who can reach out to the families. And the school psychologists, sometimes most of the time we work through the school. And so we do team meetings with schools so that we can provide them with support and recommendations and strategies of how to handle a situation surrounding a young person. And so we provide a range of services to the schools. And I'm going to stop there so that Tyrone can get in. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Tolbert. That's brilliant information. And we will be recording this. Well, this is being recorded. So these are resources that our viewers can share with friends and family, and that we can also use for future reference as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. McHardy. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Dr. Talbot. That was a very good presentation and had a lot of theoretical, it was heavily based in theory, which is very good because we can apply that. And it's going to be a perfect segue into what student services at the Barkley Institute was doing with our students in terms of their mental health needs. So I'm just going to share my screen and then we can get into the presentation. Okay, so as I had mentioned from the outset, I am the head of student services at the Barkley Institute. And student services, I want to quickly give you the composition of how we are structured. So we have one administrative assistant, we have 2 educational therapist assistants, 4 educational therapists, and they are attached to each year level. So they're full year levels at the high school or senior level. And so we have 4 educational therapists dedicated to each of those year levels. We also have 5 counselors. And similarly, the counselors, 4 of them, are attached to each year level. The other counselor is our adjustment counselor. And the adjustment counselor, their role is mainly to offer mental health services to our students who have needs that require additional attention than what the majority of other students typically warrant or need. And so that's the makeup of the department. And I just want to extend my appreciation to the team, to the members of the department, of their dedication and their hard work on an ongoing basis, and even more so during this pandemic. Now, in Bermuda's public school system, we have what we call the Comprehensive School Counseling Program. And this program is effectively, it comes out of ASCA, or the American School Counselors Association. And so within this comprehensive school program, there are 4 components. And as you can see on the screen, there's individual planning, classroom guidance, responsive services, and system support. Now, very quickly, individual planning, this makes up about 40% of the counselor's use of time. Excuse me. Need to go back. The individual planning makes up about 40% of the counselor's use of time. And this is really involves the counselor meeting with the student and their parent or guardian to go over the student's college and career plans. The other component is classroom guidance. And this makes up about 10% of the use of the counselor's time at the senior level. And this is about cultivating essential skills in students. For example, helping them build self-confidence and enhancing their social development. The next one, yes.
Not to interrupt, but we're not able to see your second slide.
Okay.
We still have that very first screen still up.
So how about now?
No, it's still that very first screen.
Okay. I'm gonna come out and go back in and see if I can share it again.
Okay.
Here we go. Okay, so maybe I need to keep it in this
Yep.
layout.
Yep.
Okay, so this is the what I was referring to, the comprehensive school counseling program, the 4 components. I just spoke about the individual planning and classroom guidance. Responsive services, this is where the counselor spends or uses 40% of their time. And that's, as the name suggests, responding to the needs of students. And that could be conducting team meetings, and Dr. Talbot would participate in some of those or most of those. But we're basically responding to the needs of the student. And the last component is the system support. This is again 10% of the counselor's use of time. Now, for the purpose of this presentation, I want us to focus or talk about responsive services and the guidance components and how it heavily featured in the counselor's comprehensive school program delivery during this pandemic. So if you look at the slide on the left-hand side, you would notice that we were responding in ways that perhaps might not be thought of as conventional. So during the height of the pandemic, or really at the beginning, when we went into shelter in place, counselors and educational therapists were delivering grocery vouchers to students and their families who were in need. So that's how we were responding. We were also distributing loaner laptops. We were also making home visits and also dropping off and collecting schoolwork packets. So our responsive services perhaps definitely increased from 40% to much higher, but it was a way to ensure that we were meeting the basic needs of our students. In the second rectangle on the slide, you will notice the heading Counselor's Corner. So in Dr. Talbot's presentation, she spoke about anxiety and how anxiety is produced and how it has come to the fore even more so amongst our students during this time. And so what we did at the Barclay Institute was we resurrected, if you will, our Counselor's Corner program, in which we would deliver classroom guidance, where we were trying to or attempting to help students to manage their emotions and anxiety as it relates to this pandemic. And with a lot of our guidance, our adjustment counselor, who I mentioned earlier, who responds to the mental health needs of students, she had created a bunch of videos and accompanying worksheets and activities that would be illustrative for students in terms of how they can manage their anxiety and to even prevent it. So if I could quickly further share the screen, I'm going to click on this link and it will give you an example of exactly what we delivered. And it's not working, of course.
Is that the YouTube link that you were referring to? Oh. He's left the studio. Okay, well, while we get him back, I just want to say thank you, Dr. Talbot, for that very informative presentation. And I do want to let the public know that we'll be asking Dr. Talbot to supply that presentation so we can post it on our website as well as our social media pages. Perhaps we will just pull out some of the more pertinent information for our listening audience and our parents to have, because there was some really, really good nuggets that was within that. Dr. Tolbert, with your presentation, do you find that our parents are reaching out, or it's something where we are actually going and finding students and parents who are having issues and addressing them, or do you find it's more of the parents and the students coming and saying, "Hey, I would like to get I would like to talk about some things that I'm going through."
It's in the what happens is in most cases, the schools seem to identify
Hmm.
children who may have some concerns
Uh-huh.
firstly, and then we reach out to the parents and bring them in and have what we call a school team-based meeting, or we work through the MTSS process um, so that we can provide support to them. Sometimes you will get some parents who will call in to the school, reach out to the counselor, or sometimes directly to myself and want to get something started. Because
Hmm.
I work with schools, I always go back and pull the school involve them in the conversation and set the meeting up through the school process. But lots of times, I believe most of the cases identified through the schools. Um, Sometimes parents are uncomfortable, even want to acknowledge that there exists a problem. And like what Tyrone mentioned earlier, it takes a lot of work building relationships with parents first to get them to feel comfortable, to get them to share. So sometimes it takes longer, and people may say, "Why is that case taking you so long?" Because I'm working on building relationships with the parent
Hmm.
and the family unit to open up to me, so that I can get to the point where we can put things into place and make things successful for the young person. And one thing I always ensure them is that the school is working on their behalf, that everybody around the table because we really care about that young person, and that whatever we do, we're doing with the hope that uh, it meets success for the young person. But their input is so valuable that we cannot do it without them, and because we know that parents know their child best, and
Hmm.
so we cannot have meetings and do things without involvement of the guardian or the parent involved. And so we try to do that. I try to do that personally as much as possible, because that's the person who knows this young person. They know what will work for the young person, and it's just getting them to open up more and to believe that we are there for them, that we really care about what happens to their young person. And so, yeah, sometimes it's a building of a relationship,
Uh-huh.
building rapport takes time. And so you just can't, in some cases, you just can't rush in and say, "I'm going to do this, do that." Sometimes I have cases where they will not refuse to work with the school. And I had a counselor call me and say, "This parent refuses to work with me." And I said, "Well, would you try talking with the parent?" And so I have, and the parent said, "Well," in the one particular case, the parent knew me from a previous matter and was very comfortable with myself. So I built her trust up, talked with her, made a couple of calls, and then she called me back, I said, "Well, I could be in the first meeting with you with the counselor if you like." And then she said, "No, I'm very comfortable now that I spoke with you, and I will work with the counselor to help my child get what they need." So it can go either way at times.
Hmm.
So Tyrone could speak to it as well. I don't know if we missed out Mr. McHardy. We was talking about who reaches out first. Do we find most times that the school identifies children most of the time, is what I've indicated, and then we reach out to the parents to bring them in to have a discussion around what's going on. We do get cases where once in a while a parent might call into the school raising concerns because they're at their wits' end and don't know what to do.
You
You
know,
could jump in on that one,
before you
Tyrone.
jump in on that, Mr.
Yes.
McCarty, it's something that Dr. Tolbert said that I think bears just a further in-depth look into. And she said MTSS, which stands, if
Mm.
those parents out there that do not understand, that stands for multi-tiered system of support. I think I got that right.
Yes, you
Yes.
did.
Well,
Yes,
Yes.
you
multi-tiered
did.
system of support, and how, and from a casual viewer, I view it along these lines, right? You'll often hear especially some of our older school parents is child comes to school, they're acting up. You know, when I went to school, I got a cut tail, and that was it, and I straightened myself up. But what we're looking at is our children are coming to school with so many other issues. Little Johnny didn't come to school with his homework done. That would, and there could be things that we're not even fathom. We can't even fathom is going on. Little Johnny may not even have had dinner last night. He may not have been able to sleep because there was noise outside that affected his ability to do homework. And so when we talk about that multi-tiered system of support, that is actually looking at our students. And I want parents to fully understand that. That's looking at our students and saying, okay, they are not performing. They are not doing what they're supposed to be. They're acting up in class. What is the things that could be behind those behaviors? Because not everyone is just inherently bad and need to be punished because they haven't done anything. We take a different approach. And so, Mr. McHardy, I just wanted to point that out because sometimes I don't think parents fully understand how that particular system works and how we go through the three tiers before we get to the point of saying there needs to be additional things put in place. And so if you could just touch on that as we head towards wrapping up. We've actually done in just over 45 minutes, and we try not to take these shows as that long.
Sure. So thank you, Education Minister. So the multi-tier systems of supports has 3 tiers, as you indicated, and the first tier is for all students. So this applies to everyone in the school building. Doesn't matter their background or what have you. It is for everyone. And so at the first tier or the base level, we support, or particularly the teachers, would support the student by praising or providing incentives for the student, making calls home, sending emails. Everyone is afforded that level of attention. At the second tier, as we move up, and if you can imagine a pyramid, if you go up the next level to tier 2, this is more now for identifying and assessing behaviors that appear to be a little bit more significant than the run-of-the-mill one, so to speak. And so then there's a coalescing of counseling and educational therapists and others who will put interventions in place to correct the behavior or the choices of the student who is in question. And then at the top of the pyramid, the third tier, this is for students who require intensive support, perhaps even support that may be delivered outside of the school. And so it's an effective way of trying to capture everyone using this multi-tiered system of supports. It doesn't always have to be interventionist kind of methodology. And so along with the multi-tier system of supports, there's something called PBIS, the positive behavioral intervention supports, where we can marry both of them, where we're preventing in a lot of ways rather than reacting. So that's basically the model of the multi-tiered system of supports.
And then thank you for that explanation, Mr. McHardy. And I would just want to thank both of you for coming on. I just want the listening public to just recognize and understand the huge task it is dealing with the public education system. We're talking about around 4,600 students, 900 staff, spread out through 37 campuses. People don't understand that. So when they look at us and say, well, they're doing it over there, they don't understand how such a wide variety that we have to deal with. It's 10 preschools, 18 primary schools, 4 middle schools, 2 senior schools, 1 special school, and 2 alternative programs with Success Academy. So it is a huge task that is ahead of us. And my hat goes off to our counselors. And I know you guys are preparing for Counselors Week, I think it was. Is it this week or next week that's coming up? And my hat goes off to our therapists and all of the persons that are a part of the student services crew that comes out, that is ably led by Ms. Tina Duke over at the Department of Education. I really do thank you for coming on board. Dana, I guess we can wrap it up with myself. I just wanted to let Bermuda know, that we are looking out for our children. We do have those things in place. That if you do need that support, please reach out. To at first case, start with your school and your school counselors, or your ADs for your schools, and they'll be able to put you in touch with the right person. Um, Bermuda, we are in the midst of a pandemic. COVID is with us, and we are doing our hardest to work around the pandemic and get our children back to where they should be and rightfully be. And every time I speak to a student, that's where they want to be, and that is in school, face-to-face classroom learning. I'm very happy to say that we can report that Southampton Preschool was very successful in going in today. Tomorrow we have Lagoon Park Preschool, and we also have St. Paul's Preschool in Paget that'll be going in on Monday. It looks very positive that we'll have a couple of primary schools starting. It's critically important for us to have all of the necessary precautions in place, all of the necessary things in place to ensure a safe and healthy return to school, but not just a return to school, but a staying in school. This is the purpose of the saliva screening program. It is a program that's set up, that is strategically set up to catch any positive persons that come into school on a proactive basis. If you haven't considered giving consent for your student, and teachers, if you haven't given consent for yourself, I urge you to do that. So if all of us are thinking along the same lines, and that is what is best for our children, you'll understand that this is something that we just need to do. We need to do what we have to do to get the best possible things in place for our young people, and that is to get them back in school. So I urge anyone who's on the fence, anyone who's considering, seek out the information. We have videos of how these tests, all these screening tests will be done online on our YouTube pages. You can also connect them on our webpage as well at moed.bm. Sign up, go to the links. They're all over the place. In social media, they're on the government website. So the government website, you go to gov.bm, it's right there on the top. Consent to saliva screening. There's no way that you cannot reach it. And if you don't have internet access, call the Department of Education, call your principal, and we'll figure out how to do that for you. But I urge everyone in Bermuda, do what you need to do to get our children back in school. And that is click on that link, sign up for the screening process so we can do what we need to do. So with that, I'll pass it back to you, Dana. And thank you, Bermuda, for tuning in. And I look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Dr. Talbot and Mr. Mccarty. Thank you, Bermuda, for tuning in this evening for Education Connections. We'll be back in 2 weeks. That will be Thursday, October 21st at 6:15. Stay tuned till we get back then. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night,
Good night.
everyone.
Thank you.